Okay, so here we are in part 2, and I was talking about my mom's family. Hunters, gatherers, plant growers, cattle ranchers, farmers, florists, tree growers, artists, quilters, painters, gardeners, seamstresses, cooks, and canners. So my mom's family lives on the family land that we've lived on for almost 200 years. They have a deep relationship with the land. I grew up working on this farm and ranch, and also in the flower shop and plant nursery that my grandma opened in the 1930s to help feed her family. My mother's family was poor and lived off the land as a means of survival. We also grew our own food and hunted our own food because there were many, many mouths to feed. I live in the Houston area, in a small town on the outskirts of Houston, but I frequently visit this farm and ranch. The original farm and ranch, we call it farm in the family, even though my grandpa kept cattle, so the more proper English term is ranch, but what can I say? We're backwoods Texans. So the original ranch is in central Texas, so it's an easy track for me. Growing up, my mother's family kept chickens, guinea fowl, turkeys, ducks, and cattle. Mostly, although there was the occasional goat or sheep venture, my grandma and grandpa kept a herd of Hereford cattle. So there are a variety of different kinds of cattle breeds if you're not familiar with them. Some are more suitable for beef cattle, such as longhorn cattle or Hereford cattle. Some of them are more suitable for dairy. So in Wisconsin, they have dairy cows. In Texas, they have beef cattle. And other states have cattle as well as part of the natural livestock. So my grandma, my mom, and my uncles and my aunts, they all grew things in the garden. They grew tomatoes and cucumbers and squash and peas, beans, corn, green beans, raspberries, strawberries, potatoes, dill, etc. for food to eat and food to sell. And then also plants to eat as well. My grandmother was very good at growing strawberry plants. She was good at growing all kinds of plants, from flowering plants to plants that produce food. She also cultivated a raspberry bush and a raspberry bramble patch in her own garden so that we would not have to go down to the riverbed and deal with all of the snakes and the alligators in order to pick raspberries. So if you're unfamiliar with raspberries, they are similar to blackberries. They just have a sharper taste, like a crisper taste, and a more developed taste. And so I grew up eating a lot of raspberries, raspberry cobbler, and just raspberries raw. My grandfather also in the house that I grew up in, which was in a country town, he grafted. He built the house I grew up in, and he also grafted pecan trees, about 10 different pecan trees with different varieties on this land. So pecans are native to Texas, but back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, my grandfather wanted additional varieties of pecans, like the ones that grew in Georgia or the ones that grew in Tennessee, just different areas of the country, like the Sly and the Success. These are different species of pecans. And so he, in the 1930s, 40s, or 50s, he grafted, which was a very new technology back then. He grafted those varieties onto rootstock that would grow in Texas soil. We also had satsuma trees and orange trees on the land of the house that I grew up in. So we grew up like knowing how to grow things from the land and tending to the land and just taking care of the land. So let's see. So my grandma, my mom, my uncles, my aunts, they all grew different things. Everybody had a different specialty. Like one uncle in particular was excellent at growing tomatoes. My mom was excellent at growing yellow squash as well as the little green saucer squash. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it's excellent fried in cornmeal. And zucchinis, and she loves squash. You know, cushaw is one of her favorite squashes, and she grows it and eats it a lot. So we ate growing up. We ate what we could grow or hunt. We were poor and there were a lot of mouths to feed. It's just as simple as that. So on this family land, you know, my grandma and grandpa, where they stayed, it was very commonplace to see a lot of wild animals growing up. And I'll probably continue that in the next section, which is part 3. Thank you for listening so far.